CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. China's premier tells Asian leaders Beijing can be an anchor for world peace and warns that chaos and conflict must not happen in Asia.
Our other headlines, shareholders welcome Alibaba's restructure. The boss says it'll make the world's biggest e-commerce giant more nimble.
Bolsonaro's back. Crowds of supporters welcome Brazil's far-right former president after a 3-month absence. Plus,
in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant that uses water, this water here, to not only generate electricity, but also to store energy.
The giant water battery in the Swiss Alps could be about to revolutionise Europe's energy supplies. China's Premier Li Qiang says China can be an anchor for world peace and warned that chaos and conflict must not happen in Asia.
in his first speech to an international audience since taking office, Li called on governments to work together to energise global growth and provide backing for global security initiatives.
He was speaking at the opening ceremony of the Bao Forum, touted as Asia's answer to the World Economic Forum in Davos. The event in China's province of Hainan gathers political leaders, academics and business people from 50 countries. Our correspondent, Zhong Chungying, is in Bao.
The Premier's speech of about 25 minutes started with invoking the notion of a community of a shared future for mankind, which is proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. And the Premier urged efforts to jointly safeguard a peaceful and stable environment for development and inject more certainty into the volatile global environment. He also spoke about the vision of a community of shared future, especially for Asia, adding that China does not have any plan or any intention for a war and treasures peace, particularly peace in Asia. And he also stressed the country's commitment to reform and opening up, adding that China seeks to win over foreign investors, even given the trade and geopolitical tensions nowadays. And on China's domestic economic outlook, he also, in his speech, added that the country will continue to expand China's market size and roll out new measures to increase market access, to optimize its business environment, and to ensure the implementation of projects, and has pledged to support its private enterprises. So, yes, in a nutshell, I think the Premier said a lot about China's spent a lot of efforts in conveying the message of the China's determination of further opening up and reform. Take a listen.
The
momentum of China's economic growth is strong. The economy showed signs of recovery in the first 2 months of this year, and the performance in March is even better. Key indicators such as consumption and investment are improving. We will carry out structural reforms on supply side while boosting domestic demand.
Mark Oswald is Chief Economist and Global Strategist at ADM Investor Services. I asked him how, after the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, China's economy can reconnect with the rest of the world.
If one looks at the last 30-odd years of China's economic development, a lot of it has involved, partnering with Europe, we're partnering with North America and other countries, other parts of Asia, and it is a very important part. However, the world has moved into a more protectionist, security-conscious security, be that energy, be that defense, be that food, and it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a very interesting meeting next week between President von der Leyen and President Macron and the Chinese leadership, because the European partnership for China is in some ways actually almost more important in business terms than the one with the US, because there is a lot of bilateral trade between the two.
Let's talk about China's domestic outlook, because there are some signs that the economy could be bouncing back. What's the forecast?
Yeah, I mean, there are encouraging signs like the decision yesterday by Alibaba to break itself up into 6 parts, which implies much less in the way of intervention in the tech sector, because it will be more manageable rather than having a behemoth. That's always, those are more agile. If we look at some of the problems in the property sector, they do seem to be gradually resolving themselves. It's not going to happen in 5 minutes, but they are gradually resolving themselves, and that's a big positive, because if the property market can basically find a base and then rebuild some momentum, that will increase a lot of domestic demand, and it will also make consumers feel a lot happier. And if one looks at the investment going into infrastructure, it's highly significant at the moment. The borrowing at regional levels is picking up at a substantial rate, and that will help also China to be somewhat more self-sufficient in a number of areas.
And the importance of joined-up global supply chains was also in focus. How important is that?
It's very important, but I think the best way to describe, we're not de-globalizing, as some people have said, but we're re-globalizing. And by that, I mean people are establishing new supply chains. One, because before they were too concentrated, and China definitely will suffer a little bit as a result, because people will just want to have more options, because everyone's been exposed, everyone's deficiencies were exposed by COVID. So, I think it's going to be something which is going to work a lot more with Latin America and with Asia in terms of establishing stronger relationships with a lot of countries in those regions in terms of those supply chains. And, Southeast Asia certainly is picking up very, very nicely now. And I think that's really where the locus, one of the key focal points is going to be, because if Southeast Asia picks up, then the partnership with China is going to be quite important on that front.
After their attendance at the Boao Forum, the Prime Ministers of Singapore, Malaysia and Spain have arrived in Beijing. Our correspondent Zhao Yunfei reports.
3 prime ministers have arrived at the Beijing International Airport. During the next day or two, the prime ministers of Malaysia, Singapore and Spain will hold a number of official meetings in Beijing. The 3 prime ministers have just finished attending the Boao Forum, which is an annual event that gathers global political and economic leaders. This is Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's first visit to China since becoming Prime Minister in November last year. The foreign ministers of the 2 countries have just met in Beijing. China hopes to speed up key cooperation projects in areas including new energy vehicles, the digital economy, semiconductors, and agriculture. This visit will take the friendship between the 2 countries to a new level. China sees cooperation with Singapore as a pace setter in the region. This is an opportunity for the 2 countries to ally. Prior to his trip, Li Hsien-loong told CGTN that he treasures the opportunities created by trade between 2 countries. He says China's development has brought huge benefits to Southeast Asia. Both Singapore and Malaysia are important links in the Belt and Road Initiative. The relationship between China and ASEAN countries uphold the stability and prosperity of Southeast Asia. This is Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's first visit to China. Spain is one of China's important economic partners in the European Union. This year marks 50 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the 2 countries. China hopes this visit will be an opportunity to create a blueprint for the future development of bilateral relations. Within just 3 hours, 3 international leaders have landed in Beijing. It's just a snapshot of the frequent foreign affairs activity in China. Facing the changing international landscape, China has an important part to play in the post-pandemic recovery. The hope is that the dialogue and cooperation will be the cornerstone of future development. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Beijing.
It's the world's biggest e-commerce giant, and Alibaba has been giving more details of its plan to split the business into 6 separate units. It made the surprise announcement earlier this week, saying it wanted to unlock shareholder value. Well, our correspondent Catherine Drew has been following the story. Catherine.
That's right, Jamie. Robin, well, senior executives have been discussing the plans with investors, hoping to offer reassurance about what some are calling the baby barbers. Well, let's take a closer look. The 6 units break down into e-commerce, cloud computing, local services, international commerce, digital media and entertainment, and logistics. The Alibaba Group will retain control through a holding company structure, but with new management for each unit. And as we heard earlier in the week, the plan is to allow these units to raise capital and potentially offer IPOs when they're ready. But the 6 are not equal. The e-commerce unit, the only one that Alibaba will retain sole ownership of, generated more profit in the last fiscal year than the whole group. But the local services and digital commerce units were struggling to make a profit in the December quarter. So why is Alibaba doing this now? Well, CEO Daniel Zhang says it's to make sure the business, which currently employs 240,000 people, to make them more agile, enhance their decision-making and respond faster to market changes. This means the sectors that are struggling can make changes more quickly, but crucially, they won't have the support of the profitable units. After that call with investors, Alibaba shares in Hong Kong rose nearly 3% before shedding some of those gains to end the day up around 2.5%. Shares in New York are currently up just under 4%, having seen a 12% rise on Wednesday. Now, the Alibaba Group CEO Daniel Zhang says preparations will begin immediately. One to watch could be the logistics arm, Chanyao. Reports say it's planning to be the first of the 6 units to go public, listing in Hong Kong before the end of the year. It's currently valued at $20 billion. Back to you.
Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Drew, our correspondent there. Let's talk now to Jim Osmond, the founder of the Edge Group, which specialises in analysis of spin-offs. Jim, good to see you. Welcome. So Alibaba's boss saying the changes to this company will make it more agile. How might that be achieved?
Well, see, here's the thing, Jamie. I have no issue with the value creation, okay? The premise that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole sometimes plays out in some of these big companies, right? And that's what they're aiming to do. They're basically saying, we have this super company, but actually it's not performing. I mean, even if you look at the growth rate over the last, from 17 to 22, Alibaba grew at 40% CAGR. And actually, but that was never translated into its stock price. So over 5 years, you're still sitting on a loss of around 12% with the S&P up 11%. So they had to do something. Now, my problem is, again, not the value creation. My problem is how they're going about it. Now, the message to investors here really is quite clear. It's an IPO. They're going to IPO the units. Now, I have a problem with IPOs. Why? Because they're manufactured investments. Let me give you a statistic here, you know, and tell you how manufactured they are. I'll give some statistics from the US over here, but it's pretty much similar around the world. The share of companies in the United States were profitable after the IPO has just been decreasing year on year, from a peak of 81% in 2009 to 28% of companies profitable after IPO last year. So you can see the edge on IPOs when investors get excited is just diminishing, because the marketing is geared to sell you in an investment. Now, that can't be a good thing. Valuations always aimed at the higher end of the range. You've seen IPOs go through like Uber. Uber, the last time it saw its higher share price was on its IPO. So, you know, they have one price, they have expiring lockouts, and just realise the investment is designed to benefit the seller. So it's a two-edged sword for investors right here. So to answer your question, yes, it creates value, but actually the way they're doing it might not be the best case.
Jim, briefly, you analyse spin-offs for a living. Which ones have historically been most successful?
Absolutely. So we've seen Carrier from Raytheon Technology, been a huge performer, three-way split. Electrolux, where you guys over there spun off their washing machines and things like commercial appliances. Huge one-year return, 150%. Return a day, about 200%. And also a spin-off from Metso as well. But, you know, spin-offs provide more value than IPOs. That's the message, really, Jamie, here for investors. And they should be looking at ones coming up like Kellogg, GE Renewable Energy, and Johnson & Johnson, rather than looking at more manufactured investments like the Alibaba IPO.
Well, we're talking about Alibaba. I mean, maybe there'll be a stampede now. I mean, which other big tech companies do you think might perhaps benefit from spinning off their divisions.
And that's a great point. You've got companies like Meta, you know, series of business. I mean, Instagram, not even monetized. WhatsApp, look at the amount of people using WhatsApp, not monetized. These are all hidden value within companies that they could potentially spin off. And I believe they will break up because there's a two-edged sword here. There's one where companies have to create value in this environment, but two, also the move by governments and authorities to actually protect your privacy and make sure companies are transparent. So you've got Meta, that people should look at. Amazon is a great one in terms of their cloud business, and even Google. So the FANGs, expect those to be broken up very soon. And that's a good margin of safety for investors who want to buy those stocks.
Jim, good to see you. Thanks for your expertise. Jim Osman, founder of the Edge Group.
Spain's consumer price inflation almost halved to 3.3% this month, the lowest level since August 2021. The slowdown was more than expected, and the National Statistics Agency says it's largely due to falling energy and fuel prices. Spain's government has helped cushion the rising cost of living by cutting value-added tax on energy costs and scrapping it on basic food items.
Meanwhile, Germany has reported higher than expected inflation despite a sharp drop in energy prices. Consumer prices in Europe's biggest economy rose 7.8% in March. That's compared with 9.3% in February.
An appeals court in India has upheld a $160 million fine issued to Google by the country's antitrust regulator. Google was given the penalty for abusing its dominant position in the Android marketplace. In India, more than 95% of smartphones use the Android system.
The London Stock Exchange is increasing efforts to attract listings by Chinese companies amid competition from Europe. Britain's Trade Commissioner to China says attracting flotations to London is a priority. Officials say attempts are being made to simplify the rules around flotations and lower the costs for overseas investors.
China and Brazil have agreed to ditch the US dollar in favour of using their own currencies. The two BRICS nations will exchange yuan for real and vice versa when carrying out trade and financial transactions, eliminating the dollar as an intermediary. Brazil says it expects the move to reduce costs and promote even greater bilateral trade and facilitate investment.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Finland's fence construction on the 200-kilometre border with Russia. Will it improve security?
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Oh, no.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
This week on Razor, the Scottish company turning plastic waste into roads and designing tiny robots for underground missions.
Putting robots in inhospitable environments where humans can't reach is a good first step to try and build that infrastructure and build that trust and learning how do we do things safely. And we want those technologies to be responsible.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The President of the European Commission says the EU needs to de-risk its future relationship with China, both diplomatically and economically.
In a speech in Brussels, Ursula von der Leyen set out what she sees as both the challenges and the opportunities of the Brussels-Beijing relationship. Our correspondent Alex Cadier reports.
Ursula von der Leyen's address has been described as one of the most significant speeches any of us will hear in Brussels this year. The European Commission President set out how she viewed the bloc's relationship with China, a relationship she called one of the most intricate and important in the world. The EU chief noted both positives and challenges to the Brussels-Beijing relationship, ahead of a trip she is planning to Beijing next week. She welcomed the reopening of China's economy after the COVID pandemic and celebrated what she described as China's leading role in securing global biodiversity agreements, adding that the EU and China could and should continue to cooperate on tackling climate change. But the Commission President made it clear that she thinks China has changed, and so should the relationship. Ursula von der Leyen criticized what she described as more repressive domestic policies in China and accused Beijing of asserting itself abroad by seeking to put itself at the center of a new international order. Because of these challenges, Ursula von der Leyen urged the European Union to de-risk its relationship with China, but not unwind it altogether.
We will never be shy in raising the deeply concerning issues I've already set out. But I believe we must leave space for discussion on a more ambitious partnership and on how we can make competition fairer and more disciplined. And more broadly, we need to think about how we can work together productively, the global system in the future, and on which challenges.
For its part, China has not yet confirmed President von der Leyen's trip to Beijing, but says it sees the EU as a partner from which it hopes to find mutually beneficial opportunities. What's clear is that, though challenging, the EU-China relationship will remain crucial for both sides for years to come. Alex Cadier, CGTN, Brussels.
Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, has returned home after 3 months in the United States.
Hundreds of supporters greeted him in the capital, Brasilia. Bolsonaro is expected to lead the right-wing opposition against the left-wing president Lula da Silva, but he faces a series of legal investigations. It's his first time back in Brazil since he lost the election, and his supporters stormed Congress in January. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Lucrecia Franco, who's in Rio. Lucrecia, how have Bolsonaro's supporters reacted to his return to Brazil?
Well, as expected, there were many supporters that gathered yesterday night in Orlando before Bolsonaro embarked last night, and hundreds more that came to welcome him early this morning in Brasilia. But he left the airport through an alternative exit without addressing them. Authorities had stepped up security and closed the traffic along the capital to prevent the risk of protests. His homecoming has been highly awaited by his followers. So it is important to highlight that Bolsonaro lost October's runoff election by less than 2% of the vote, so with some 58 million votes. So he still has a significant political capital, something that he plans to regain now. He's expected to lead, as you said, the opposition to leftist President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, or Lula as he's known. And it won't be easy. Bolsonaro never formally conceded defeat, and many of his supporters believe the election was stolen or rigged.
Now, he also has a number of legal investigations underway. How are they? Where are we with those?
Well, Bolsonaro is facing an array of lawsuits and court investigations, from spreading fake news about Brazil's voting system to casting doubt about the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. But the most serious is perhaps an ongoing probe into his alleged role in inciting his die-hard supporters to storm government buildings on January 8. A near replay of what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Another fresh case involves gifts Bolsonaro received from Saudi Arabia worth millions of dollars that were not declared to customs when they got into the country. Officials say Bolsonaro may have committed embezzlement. Brazilian law bars public officials from keeping expensive gifts, and for now analysts say it is unlikely he will be arrested, but the greatest risk at this point is his power to create political turmoil in a still deeply divided country. Jamie.
Lucrecia, keep us posted. Thanks for that. Our correspondent Lucrecia Franco in Rio de Janeiro.
An American journalist working in Russia has been arrested on charges of espionage. Evan Gershkovich, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, was taken into custody while on a trip to the city of Ekaterinburg.
Russian security services have accused him of spying for Washington. The Wall Street Journal denies the allegations.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. So, John, how has the Wall Street Journal responded?
Well, very badly. This is one of the lead stories in America this morning. This is the Wall Street Journal today, which has a picture of Prince Charles on the front, toasting his German host. The Journal has just issued a statement from their headquarters, which is now on 6th Avenue. They say they are deeply concerned about Evan Gershkovich. He's a Moscow-based reporter for the Journal, and he went to Yekaterinburg, which you know from history as the site of the massacre of the family of the last Tsar after the Russian Revolution in 1918. That was in July of that year. That's why Yekaterinburg is very well known. But today, it is also the location of a very large science and industrial park, which is owned and run, obviously, by the Russian authorities. Now, he went there, we are told, to do a story on the Wagner Group, which is this group of mercenaries or fighters, whatever you want to call them, who are propping up the Russian military in the Ukraine. Now, Russia has said that he was caught red-handed, by which they mean spying. They're accusing him of spying. He's just appeared in court, I believe it was in Moscow, and that was kind of for the arraignment, as it were, the first stages of the court process. Now, he's facing a 20-year sentence if he is found guilty. He is the first American journalist to be arrested in this way under these kind of charges, in other words, spying, since the end of the Cold War 30 years ago. And already there is talk here in America of there being some kind of swap involving this journalist for the many Russian prisoners that are held in jails here in the United States. And that would be along the lines of Brittany Griner, who is the female pro basketball player who was held in Russia, and there was a swap done between the two authorities a couple of months ago, and she came home safely in return for somebody that Moscow very badly wanted to get out of a U.S. jail. Now, it's very early days at the moment. It's far too early to say whether that will happen. I think the key thing is to try and get this journalist out of jail if they possibly can. They're working at every level of diplomacy possible, but it is clearly a worry at this time when the situation in Ukraine is ongoing and the United States is so opposed to Russia in every way possible. Guys?
And John, there's what could be a happy ending for Disney, which seems to have outmaneuvered the state of Florida.
Yes. Well, unlike that previous story, this is a great story, and this really is very, very clever indeed. Now, we did on the program a couple of weeks ago the story that basically the governor of Florida, who is a Republican, Ron DeSantis, and has not yet declared, but probably will be a candidate to be the president in 2024, basically very upset with Disney. He and many Republicans think that Disney has become far too woke, and he wanted to punish them for various reasons that we don't need to go into now. So what you have to understand is that Disney World, just outside Orlando in Florida, is not just a theme park. It's much bigger than that. It's about 50 square kilometers. And the whole area is known as Reedy Creek. And the point about this is that historically, ever since it was built back in the early 1970s, historically, Disney has run the entire 50 square kilometers. They're in charge of fire provision, water provision, road maintenance. They basically act as a local council. They do basically in this 50-kilometer area what you would expect a council to do. Well, Florida moved to punish Disney by taking that away. And our story last month was that the Florida authorities had removed Disney's right to be in charge of that area. Well, now today it's come to light that exactly the same time as the authorities in Tallahassee were meeting, the board that was in charge of running this huge area called Reedy Creek was meeting separately and using local covenants has taken away all the ability of the new board being appointed by the Republican governor of Florida. It's taken away all its powers. So basically they've nullified the move. So it just goes to show you, and I've said this on our program before, don't mess with the mouse. Those people are really tough. And so now we have a situation where we're going to move into endless court cases while they try and sort it out.
John, thank you very much. Our correspondent John Terrace in New York.
Don't mess with the mouse. More insights from the week's news in the United States, Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. We're in the Philippines with the extraordinary story from survivors after 29 passengers lost their lives in a ferry fire.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail. The background.
Defense ministers from
The wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. The headlines again. China's premier tells Asian leaders Beijing can be an anchor for world peace and warns that chaos and conflict must not happen in Asia.
Our other headlines, shareholders welcome Alibaba's restructure. The boss says it'll make the world's biggest e-commerce giant more nimble.
And Bolsonaro's back. Crowds of supporters welcome Brazil's far-right former president after a 3-month absence.
The financial sector has the potential to help cut 60% of global food emissions by the year 2030, with an estimated economic benefit of $1.5 trillion.
That's according to a report by think tank Planet Tracker. It gathered data from 400,000 companies across 160 countries, including food giants such as Nestle, McDonald's and Walmart. It says progress needs to be made in traceable supply chains, halving food waste, defunding deforestation and encouraging regenerative farming. Well, let's talk to Peter Elwin, who's the Director of Fixed Income and Head of Food and Land Use Programme at Planet Tracker. Welcome, Peter. So, firstly, how does the food industry contribute to carbon emissions? How big is the problem?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, the problem is really significant. I mean, the food system contributes about a third of humanity's GHG footprint. And also is a significant source of pollution, including plastics and nitrogen and various other sort of chemicals. So it's a very significant source of harms. And in fact, it's actually responsible for 20% of the deaths worldwide are sort of caused by dietary related issues. So food system's a big problem. and we really need to take action very soon to solve it if we want to solve our linked nature and climate problems.
So when it comes to taking action, where are the main areas where they can improve?
Now, that's a good question. I mean, the financial markets, which we focus on as a think tank, they've got about $8.6 trillion invested in the food system. A lot of that capital is invested in the downstream end, so it's invested in the retailers and the manufacturers and the food service companies. But the actual harms, of course, tend to be taking place at the upstream end. It's amongst the producers. It's the sort of big cattle farmers and organizations like that are causing a lot of the serious harms, causing the deforestation. You were talking about Bolsonaro in Brazil earlier. And the deforestation and some of these other environmental harms are caused by the food production processes. What we need to do is get a link between the financial market investment towards the downstream end and what's actually going on at the upstream end. And that's why one of the key things that we want to focus on, as you mentioned, is traceable supply chains.
So how can the financial sector in practice do this? Some kind of benchmarking system?
Well, I think benchmarking is helpful, but I think it's actually much more important they really get sort of stuck in and engage with companies on an individual basis. As I say, 8.6 trillion of funding invested in the system. That's a very serious amount of capital. The revenues the food system is generating, we think they're about 20% of global GDP. So there's a lot of financial exposure there. There's a lot of opportunity as well. And what we'd like to see financial institutions do is actually engage with individual companies, meet the management, ask the questions, and if necessary, start charging more to companies that are not acting in a sustainable way, and also offering beneficial financial terms to those companies which are actually moving in the right direction, because that's where the investment gains will be held.
But charging more to companies, I mean, companies are having to put food prices up anyway. We're seeing rising food prices in many countries. Aren't we going to end up seeing this cost passed on to consumers who are perhaps already struggling to pay for these rising food prices?
Yes, well, I think that's a really good question, and that's clearly something everybody's sort of very concerned about. But the food system wastes about a third of the food. So roughly a third of the sort of protein and calories that starts its journey at the beginning of the food system never actually makes it into the mouths of the people it should feed. So simply increasing the food system's efficiency would almost certainly drive down prices. Cutting the amount of pollution. Pollution is another source of cost. That would also make the system more efficient and allow for prices to be cut. Making sure farmers are paid fairer prices and the profits are distributed sort of more evenly across the system would also build resilience. And again, that would allow prices to come down. So we think the actions that financial institutions can take in this context would actually have a really beneficial effect on consumers from a price perspective, as well as on the planet and on our health and well-being.
So I wonder if you can break it down for us. How much difference will that make in terms of cutting carbon emissions, shaking up the food system? How much will that affect it?
Well, we think that we're recommending 6 particular actions that financial institutions should focus on, and we have a framework consisting of sort of 4 strategic themes which underpin that. We think if financial institutions really drove those 6 actions and sort of persuaded companies to actually embed them into their business processes, you could cut a fifth of humanity's GHG footprint. That's 10 gigatons of CO2 equivalent for those who like numbers. But, you know, knocking a fifth off would really take us a long way towards our climate ambitions and the idea that, you know, we will limit temperature rise by 2050. So it's a really, really big lever that we should be pushing on hard.
Peter, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Peter Elwin from Planet Tracker.
Australia's parliament has passed breakthrough climate legislation targeting the country's worst polluters.
It will force coal mines and oil refineries to curb emissions by about 5% each year. The laws apply to 215 major industrial facilities, each producing more than 100,000 tonnes of greenhouse gases a year, and form the backbone of Australia's pledge to reach net zero emissions by 2050.
The British government has unveiled its latest steps to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced more investment in renewables, along with measures designed to make energy supply more resilient and greener. It includes overhauling planning rules to speed up construction of new wind turbines and solar panels, and backing projects to capture carbon underground and produce clean hydrogen.
storing electricity is a huge technological challenge all around the world. A giant water battery in the Swiss Alps could be about to revolutionise Europe's energy supplies.
It doesn't just generate power, it's also able to store huge amounts of it. Our correspondent Emma Keeling reports from the plant that has enough capacity to charge 400,000 cars at the same time.
It's a tradition we must break if we're going to prevent catastrophic climate change. We can't continue to rely on coal, oil and natural gas for power generation. Renewable energy such as wind and solar is playing a greater role. More than 1/3 of global electricity comes from low-carbon sources. But how can we store this electricity without using giant batteries containing metals that can contaminate ecosystems? I'm around 2,000 metres above sea level in the Alps of Switzerland. And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant that uses water, this water here, to not only generate electricity, but also to store energy. But to understand how this giant water battery works, I need to go hundreds of metres underground. Nant de Drance is a net consumer of electricity. Its role is to store and generate again when needed. When solar and wind create more energy than required, that excess is sent to the plant and is used to pump water from the large Emerson reservoir up to the Vieux Emerson reservoir. So the energy is being stored as water, like a water battery in the upper lake. When there's a higher demand for electricity than is being generated among other renewable energy sources, water from the upper lake passes through the turbines of the Nant de Drance plant, generating electricity. The same water can be pumped and turbined back and forth between the two lakes, depending on excess supply or extra demand.
Welcome in Châtelard. Here in the middle of the Swiss Alps. So right now we are here in Le Châtelard, so at the bottom of the tunnel, and then we are going to drive underground and we can go to the heart of the power plant.
It's taken 14 years to develop this new plant at a cost of $2.2 billion.
So that's the main machine cavern. Wow. So almost 200 meters long, it's 52 meters high and 32 meters wide.
In here are 6 turbines that do all the work.
The same machine can rotate in 2 directions. In one direction it's pumping, in the other direction then it's turbining, generating electricity. If we use all the water from the upper lake and we turbine full power, then in 20 hours we have our lake which is empty. That's an Olympic swimming pool every 10 seconds. So here the water is coming from the Vieux Emerson lake and is flowing here. Here in the middle we have another valve, a safety valve, which can be closed in case of issue down into the power plant, so we can stop the water. Behind this wall, we have 25 million cubic meters of water, and that translates, I would say, in 18 gigawatt hour of electrical energy if we turbine the complete capacity of the lake.
Extreme weather events are occurring more frequently, including droughts, which means water management of multi-purpose reservoirs is vital. What's the importance of this pumped storage plant, not only to the Swiss grid, but also to the European grid?
Because we are going to need more storage and more capacity to manage the grid. The intermittency of the new generation, the variability of the consumption is really pushing us into this need of more pumped storage power plants.
Robert Gleit sending that report by our correspondent Emma Keeling. Indonesia has set an ambitious goal to transition to electric vehicles and reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuels.
The largest economy in Southeast Asia offers huge potential for this market, and China is one of the countries helping with the road to changing the industry. CGTN's Silkina Aluwalia reports from Jakarta.
Indonesia's future to go green just got brighter. Chinese auto firms are looking to invest in production facilities to boost Indonesia's electric vehicle industry, bringing Chinese expertise and technology to the country. Experts say Indonesia's automotive industry is the largest in ASEAN, making it an ideal market for investors.
Chinese company CGTN has been looking for resources to produce EV batteries in Indonesia, and we have a big nickel reserve here. They're just one of the investors. We have more Chinese investors coming in, such as BYD. It's still under process, but these companies are funding in big amounts.
But it's not just about business opportunities. The growth of Indonesia's electric vehicle industry has positive implications for the environment.
The Indonesian government is working to achieve net zero emissions by 2060. And to make that happen, they've already begun to slowly phase out vehicles running on gasoline and diesel.
The ultimate plan is for ownership of electric vehicles to reach at least 90% in the next 20 years.
For Indonesia, we currently face a very, challenging situation because our EV adoption face this limited purchasing power. And by increasing the variety in terms of brands, models, and prices, we can actually tap into a lower purchasing power market bracket. And Chinese company can provide that to fill that gap actually.
The government has also set a target of having 20% of all new cars sold in Indonesia to be electric by 2025. It's clear that the industry is rapidly growing, and Chinese investors are playing an important role in that growth. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
At least 29 people have died after a ferry caught fire in the Philippines. The blaze spread rapidly while many passengers were sleeping.
Some victims, including children, are said to have drowned after jumping into the water. Our correspondent Gretchen Malalad reports.
The fire is said to have started in a cabin at around 11 p.m. local time, while most of the passengers were sleeping. The ferry, the MV Lady Mary Joy 3, was carrying 205 passengers and 35 crew. Dozens perished in the blaze, some of them children. The ferry left the port of Zamboanga City at around 8 p.m., bound for Jolo Island. Smoke was later seen on the second floor. The flames spread quickly, engulfing most of the ferry, forcing many passengers to jump into the dark waters, where some drowned. When the Philippine Coast Guard, Navy, and local fishermen arrived at the scene, they rescued many passengers from the water as the fire raged for another 8 hours. In the morning, the burnout ferry was towed to shore. Most of the victims who died in the flames are said to have been in the budget section of the ferry. Officials are now investigating the cause of the fire and whether the 33-year-old vessel was seaworthy. It's the Philippines' second ferry disaster in less than a year. Last May, 7 people died in a fire on a high-speed ferry in Quezon Province. Gretchen Malalad, CGTN, Manila.
Finland is strengthening its eastern border with Russia and has started building a 200-kilometre fence. The Finnish border guards said the 3-metre-high barrier will improve security and help stop disruption if Moscow decides to weaponize mass migration against Helsinki. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic has the story.
A Finnish border guard watches a single car at the Imatra border crossing. And just few people travel to the area now. The border guards say before the coronavirus pandemic, up to 13,000 people crossed here daily. Now, a couple of hundred people travel across the border.
When we had this, 13,000 passengers, this all lanes was full of cars. So it's it's very hard to imagine, but then it was different. I was working then, so cars were the line was so big, it's full of cars through here, almost up to Imatra.
But despite the lack of passengers, there is still a lot of activity here. This is as far as we are allowed to go at the Imatra border crossing. Behind me is the Russian crossing, Svetogorsk. And just before it, on the Finnish side, is an excavator working on Saturday on a construction of the border wall. In 2015, Nearly 5,000 illegal migrants crossed border from Russia into Finland. Now that Finland is in its final stages of joining the NATO military alliance, this may spark illegal border crossings from Russia again.
We absolutely need the fence so that nobody can come over just like that. Absolutely, a high fence.
The guards at the Imatra border crossing say there are almost no illegal migrants crossing their part of the border now. Yet, even opposition leaders in Finland support the costly fence project.
The Finnish border guard has announced that a border fence is necessary. We have a long border and we don't have enough human resources to control all of it. On the other hand, electronic monitoring must be increased. This is the view of the Finnish border guard about the actions needed at the border.
The entire 200-kilometer-long fence along this section of Finland's border with Russia is expected to be completed by 2026. Aljosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Imatra.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. How Shanghai Fashion Week has become a launchpad for the industry's best designers eyeing the world's biggest market.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw. The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So into the attention of world leaders.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew. And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. A cargo train carrying the toxic substance ethanol has derailed and caught fire in the U.S. state of Minnesota. Canisters carrying the chemical exploded on impact, causing the blaze, which then damaged several rail cars and forced residents living nearby to leave their homes. This all comes 2 months after another train carrying hazardous chemicals derailed in the town of East Palestine in Ohio.
The US military has confirmed several casualties after 2 Black Hawk helicopters crashed in Kentucky. It happened during a training exercise close to the Fort Campbell Army base. The base is home to the US Army's only Air Assault Division, which has recently served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
More than 1,000 migrants in Mexico have turned themselves in to U.S. border authorities after reaching El Paso, Texas, by foot. A false rumor circulated on social media that migrants surrendering at the border would be able to freely cross into U.S. territory. The migrants say they're frustrated by recent asylum policies and shaken by that fire at a Mexican detention center that killed dozens of people this week.
Pope Francis is said to be improving after being admitted to hospital with breathing problems on Wednesday. The Vatican says that the 86-year-old Pope will stay under observation for a few more days before returning to his duties. The leader of the world's Catholic Church made an address by video link from his bed, calling for an end to the conflict in Ukraine.
Shanghai Fashion Week is seen throughout the industry as a launch pad for top designers.
As this year's event comes to a close, organisers are hoping it will help Shanghai become a global centre for fashion. Our correspondent Chen Tong reports.
One of the biggest shows at the Autumn-Winter 2023 Shanghai Fashion Week. Judy Hua debuted her latest designs on the runway. Hua is an old friend of the Shanghai Fashion Week. She attended for the first time in 2009. At the time, it was not a big event. Hua only had 5 team members. Now she has over 40 people in the workshop.
Fashion Week can bring together all types of resources in the industry. It's hard for a brand to get them together. A clothing brand is like a human being. If we were only kids in 2009 when we first got started, at least we know how to walk now.
Hua has become a well-known designer in China and has been cooperating with multiple foreign brands. Her label's growth is a symbol of how Shanghai Fashion Week has developed. When Shanghai Fashion Week was first held, well-known foreign brands were the major players. But now, domestic designers are dominating the runways. Over the past 2 decades, Shanghai Fashion Week has seen domestic designers like Judy Hua who have stepped onto the global stage.
Over the past 2 decades, many Chinese designers chose to put their first shows here, and many designers who want to go back to China to develop, such as Masha Ma, Da Wei Sun, and Wuma Wang, chose Shanghai Fashion Week to debut their home shows.
Now, with COVID restrictions lifted, Shanghai Fashion Week hopes to become an iconic event in the industry.
Last year, we launched a new standard for traditional Chinese clothing at the Fashion Week, and we want to play a leading role in the industry in the future.
Shanghai Fashion Week's ambition also echoes Shanghai's goal to build itself into a global fashion center. The city hopes the value of its fashion industry to reach over 52 billion yuan by 2025, with an annual growth rate of 5%. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
The headlines again. China's premier tells Asian leaders Beijing can be an anchor for world peace and warns that chaos and conflict must not happen in Asia.
Our other headline, shareholders welcome Alibaba's restructuring. The CEO says it will make the world's biggest e-commerce giant more nimble.
And Bolsonaro is back. Crowds of supporters welcome Brazil's far-right former president after a 3-month absence in the United States.
And that's just about it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
There's more on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.